Everybody, welcome to Kingdom Builder TV. We're here live at the International Christian Retail Show in Orlando, Florida. I'm joined by filmmaker Tim Mahoney. Thank you so much for joining us on Kingdom Builder TV.
Really glad to be here, Jay.
Thanks for coming in. Now, Tim, you're a filmmaker and author, and we're here to talk about your new book and film. It's called Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, A Filmmaker's Journey, and we have both the book here and the DVD, the Blu-ray actually. Blu-rays are cool; they're in high definition. So.
And we do have it in DVD.
Have it in DVD
and
for those
streaming as well.
For those who like the grainy picture. They can watch their DVD all they want. Well, can you tell us about Patterns of Evidence, and what inspired you to do the book and all?
I'd love to. There's a lot of people that are questioning the Bible. Did it really happen? Is there really any evidence for it? People are questioning, well, how much of the Bible is true? I mean, do you really think that the events in the Old Testament, like the parting of the sea, or the fact that there were plagues that came on Egypt? Noah's Ark. Did any of these stories actually happen? And I was raised in a home where I was taught these stories. And when I got the opportunity to actually go to Egypt and investigate, I heard about people searching for the route of the Exodus and diving and looking for parts of chariots and all that. I thought, that's fascinating. And so I decided to go off to Egypt and do this, raise the dollars to make a documentary about it. And when I got to the location where the Israelites were supposed to be, to the very dig site, I found out from the Egyptologist that there was, in his mind, he didn't see a connection between what he was doing and the Bible.
Right, and I was really intrigued by the evidence that you had found. I guess I'd never really thought about the physical evidence left behind in Egypt, but rather the scrolls and stuff that depict what happened in the Bible. Why is this important to know?
Well, what's really interesting is that, first of all, the story of the Exodus is one of the foundational stories of the Bible. From the story of the Exodus comes the whole promise to Abraham, that his family. So if you start with Abraham, Abraham was told by God that he would have this family, but he didn't have any children, as you know the story is.
Right.
And from his seed that all nations would be blessed, and that he would actually, his seed would become a nation. And it became, according to the story of the Bible, it became the nation of Israel. But they were trapped in this place called Egypt as slaves, and that they would be a deliverer, and that this deliverer eventually was a person called Moses, and that Moses leads them miraculously out of Egypt, miraculously crosses the sea, and their enemies are destroyed, the Egyptians that pursue them, and they go to a mountain where God marries these people, the Jews, and makes a covenant with them. And at that mountain, he also gives them laws to live by. And they go off, and they're supposed to go off. It takes them 40 years because they don't have the faith to enter the promised land. But eventually, they take what's called the promised land, which becomes the nation of Israel. And that's the story. That whole foundational story of the Exodus connects from Abraham all the way through. And Jesus in the New Testament quotes Deuteronomy more than any other book. And so Jesus talks about Moses. He tells them, because you don't understand Moses and the prophets, you don't understand me. So if the Exodus didn't happen, then this whole foundational story, the whole idea of law, the whole idea of what we've gotten, Moses is on the Supreme Court. So all these ideas came from nowhere. They're a myth. And Jesus and the disciples are liars because they believed in him, or they're misled, we could say. So what depends upon it? Almost everything depends on the story, if the Exodus happened or not.
And I know that in recent years they've actually done archaeological work by the Red Sea, and they actually found remnants of chariots. If I'm not mistaken, there's actually pieces that people have linked to these actually being the Pharaoh, and that's one thing that's the one thing that you're challenged with in the film is was the Pharaoh that's depicted in Scripture by name, is that the actual Pharaoh that that this happened. And in the book, you actually do your own digging and discover that maybe we're looking in the wrong timeline. That
Right.
it didn't happen. The Pharaoh's name
Ramesses.
Ramesses.
Yes.
So Ramesses is often depicted in the story of the Exodus, and your book, you're wanting to bring forth evidence that we may have been looking in the wrong time period.
Yes, it's very interesting. There's some clues in the Bible that basically talk about when the events of the Exodus happened. And one of the clues is that it's from 450 years from the time of the temple, and another is that they built the store cities of Ramesses and Pithom. And so people knew where Ramesses and Pithom were, and so they figured, well, if they built the store cities of Ramesses and Pithom, then it has to be during the time of Ramesses. But very interesting, just very interesting little clue is that if they built the cities of Ramesses and Pithom, and Ramesses was the Pharaoh of the Exodus, well, the Pharaoh, after Moses kills an Egyptian and flees, the Pharaoh dies, and another one, and Moses returns to a different Pharaoh. So it couldn't have been Ramesses if it was that Pharaoh in the first place, because it says he died.
Right.
So then some people think it might have been Ramesses' son. But the whole issue was that when people looked at Ramesses or his son, they started to realize that there's no evidence for the rest of the story. Ramesses never had a collapse of Egypt. There was never any indication. There's no any indication in the Promised Land or during that time period that there was a group of people that came in. And that is the heart of the problem right now, is that understanding is what I think the film takes on. And what we find is that at the very location underneath the city of Ramesses is another city that's older, that's called Avaris. And so that city was built by a different pharaoh. And that is a city that shows the pattern of evidence that matches the story of the Exodus. And that is a city that actually shows character like Joseph and a palace and early Semitic type people coming into that and building a community. The whole story, it's underneath the city. The story is underneath the city of Ramesses, and it's called Avaris.
And I noticed in the film that there's also, when you're talking about evidence, there was also a kind of burial chamber that had a very tall statue that very much resembled Joseph.
Yes.
And it was because you had, you read the Bible, and Joseph's described as having a coat of many colors, and even though the figure is like the color is worn from it, you can see that evidence there that possibly could have been Joseph. And of course, we all know that Joseph was later taken from Egypt because he didn't want to be buried there, and he was buried later in the Promised Land. But that's some more of the evidence that you found there that was.
Yes, the story of Joseph. That at Avaris is this house that comes in that could, some people suggest, could have been the house of Jacob, Joseph's father, and around it were other houses, a small community. And I guess according to custom, the son or the ruling son would tear down the father's house and build over the top of it. And that's what they found, was that if Joseph sort of took over the leadership of the family, that this first house that was built there is torn down, and another house is built on it, but it's an Egyptian house this time. But it's not owned by an Egyptian, it's owned by a Semitic type person. And in that house, what's very interesting is there were 2 additions put onto that house as well, and Joseph had 2 sons, matching additions. And behind the house then was a area where they had a cemetery, and they had 11 graves and major graves and 1 major tomb. I mean, it was like these tombs that were there. And so people looked at it and said, well, how many brothers did Joseph have? Well, he had 11. And then they had this pyramid tomb. It was a very unusual tomb that would be only given to somebody who was esteemed in Egypt, because nobody got a pyramid tomb except people that had done something great. So the story was matching, as we said.
And Joseph was the only one that had that power in Egypt.
Right.
He was the one that was given second command over all of Egypt.
Right. And at the same time, which is amazing, if we look at who the Pharaoh was at that time, is that there was a canal that was was dug at this time. There's a pyramid. We don't know when the canal was dug, but we do know that there's a canal right next to this pyramid of this very famous pharaoh. And today that, and throughout the last maybe several thousand, I'm not sure if it's 2,000 years or at least the last 1,500 years, it's been called the Joseph Canal, or Bar Joseph. So there's lots of things that match or connect with the story of Joseph that all happen at the right time, but it's earlier in time.
And that's cool because you see, you take on a different story than what a lot of people, because I know that there's been a lot of people that go over to Israel and pinpoint the locations where Jesus actually walked, the Garden of Gethsemane, the Mount of Olives, Calvary. And that's pretty well documented. But the interesting thing about what you were doing with Patterns of Evidence is that you were taking the story from the Old Testament, the foundation of what was to come in the New Testament, and finding the truth. And that's what I really liked about that, because that to me kind of conflicted with everything that I had ever heard about the story and where this took place and everything. So it was really cool to see that in the book and see that in the film. And the film's 2 hours long, and you have an amazing amount of reference in the book. And I'm sure, I guess my next question is, how long did the research and everything take you to do before you set off on the trip to actually go to the physical places?
Well, I started in 2002, and so it's been over 13 years, 12 years probably for the film. And I think what happened was that we were gathering lots of footage from different trips, and we used that footage from 2002 all the way through till the film was released in January.
Is that why you look different?
What?
Is that why you look different in the film?
Yes, I look a little different, yeah. But most of my, how different do I look, by the way? Do I look that different? Yeah.
No, I'm just...
Yeah. I used to have dark hair. That's what happened. But what ended up happening was that the investigation, the material that we got actually is for other films, because Patterns of Evidence is not just one film. It's a series of films. Right now we see it as a trilogy. And so we knew that after a while was that we had to deal with this question, because a lot of times people are looking for the route of the Exodus. But the big problem wasn't the route of the Exodus at this moment. The big problem was people said they didn't exist in the first place.
Right.
There's no evidence. So if we would have looked for the route of the Exodus, people would have gone, oh, so what? But because the film has now established a credibility, in my opinion, and others, that there is a pattern. I'm not saying that it's it. All I'm going to say as a filmmaker is there is a pattern that matches every step of the story. Now you can decide, and the audiences decide for themselves. Here's what the naysayers say. Here's what people say, wait a minute. And what we did, I think, which has never been done, was put all those ideas together in a way that people could visually understand it.
Right.
And do it in a cinematic storytelling way. And it's an enormous story. It covers hundreds and hundreds of years. And so it takes some time to basically unfold that story.
And I'm a visual person, so I actually like to see and read, so I'm glad that I was able to get the book and the movie to watch, to be able to kind of connect the two and be able to kind of read along while I'm watching. And I really think Patterns of Evidence is really important when it comes to apologetics too, because the story of Moses is a well-known story and has been made into films and become one of the most read accounts in the Old Testament. Were there things that you discovered on these trips that you weren't expecting?
I think that, the answer is yes. There are things that would happen, like I say, that you didn't always know what you had. I think a lot of archaeologists are digging up material, by the way. And I don't know if most people realize this, but a lot of archaeology is dug up and people don't know what it is. They just put it in boxes, because at the dig site, they have a limited amount of time. Some people in the Delta dig, they take photographs, and they take probably video, and they draw. They do lots of drawings of what they have. They don't necessarily decipher all the time what it is. They put it in boxes and they label it and they send it back. And there are literally, just like the movie Raiders of the Lost Ark, there are warehouses full of
Area 51.
of material that no one has diagnosed. That's the crazy part, because who's going to fund it? I mean, there's a lot of stuff that people just don't know, and somebody comes along like the Israeli pedestal, which is in this book here. It's called the Berlin pedestal, but it's the name Israel, and it's much earlier in time than Ramesses. And so we show other artifacts that are Egyptian that show that Israel, the name Israel, and this people Israel, was way before the time of Ramesses. So Ramesses was actually a name, a place name, that helped people to understand where it was, because that's all they knew. They didn't know the older name of Ars underneath that city. And that's what the film kind of helps people to see.
So all these boxes of evidence, we could have all the answers you're looking for just sitting in a box somewhere, and they just haven't been deciphered yet. Like figuring out what is this, what time period, and how does it connect to what we're doing here.
Yes, and with the little, but I want to encourage people is that with the little, there's absolute patterns of evidence that match the story of the Exodus and the story of conquest. And the challenge is that right now is that if you go off to university, that the professors will tell you that there's no evidence for this, and they'll be very adamant in that. This is an important film for people of faith to basically say, to see it first of all, and to have the knowledge of it, both the film and the book, help them to clarify. And I've heard people are saying, you know what, it just helps me to be bolder in my faith, because there are patterns that match the story. And it's been a fantastic tool for families that have skeptic or relatives or people who are atheists or whatever to start a conversation. The film is neutral in the sense, but the evidence is very loud.
Right.
And I think that's the beauty of it. Is that, and that's the approach that we're going to continue to take.
And I think that's what people are going to really connect with it. When you were on these trips, what was it like being on these locations that could very well be the same plot of ground that Joseph, Jacob, Moses walked on? I mean, what was that like, being in those places that could very well be the exact places that are depicted in Scripture? I mean, was that? I'm sure that was exciting, being in those places where these real life people from the Bible were actually at.
I think that if anyone who's ever gone to Jerusalem or been to the Sea of Galilee, all of a sudden what happens for them is that their world has a much better reference point, for the Bible. The desert, being in the desert, being in situations where you're walking in possible areas that the Israelites might have walked, or that you were in areas, it gives you an appreciation for really what happened.
Right.
And I think that's what history is a lot about, understanding the context of what people might have had to experience, to live dealing with, from where they got their water to where they might have built their homes, and how they had to deal with what they were dealing with. And so for me, there have been times when I have been, let's say, at a place where I might have thought where was the crossing site, like one of them that I'm interested in. I've been to most of the crossing sites, by the way, in Egypt and in the Sinai. And I was at the one at the Nueva where people are. I said, if this happened here, this is much bigger than I ever anticipated. This would have been a spectacular story. A spectacular sight to see water, and so I think that what it does for you is it just helps you to realize how big a story,
right,
and how big these events would have been,
and how real they really are.
Yeah. So that part of it is, in my role is as a filmmaker, as a person who grew up in a home where the stories were told, is to have feet in both worlds, because there's some people that just cannot take this, they just can't believe this story, and they just want hard evidence. Right. So I'm standing, as my role is to sort of I understand the world of the Bible and faith, but I also believe that reason is there as well. And there are people that don't have any faith, they only have reason. Mm-hmm. And so you bring these two together, and I think that what we need to do is that they are not opposed to each other, because they both are about truth.
Right.
And together, faith and reason can come together. Because there are some people that are trying to be reasonable, but when you look at it doesn't add up, you know. All their ideas don't add up. But they're kind of taping it together. They're taping their ideas together, but their worldview is fragmented. And if you ever basically, sort of identify this larger story from the creation through to how do we begin, what are we about, where are we going, I think that is what I'm interested in. That's why we started this company called Thinking Man Films and Media, mm-hmm. is to think about that and to get people to wake up and to think and to look at the Bible in a whole new lens, as it were. What does the Bible say, and can we find evidence for it? And like you said, this book and this documentary, and it's going to be on sale in stores, Christian bookstores at Walmart on August 4th. But this helps people to basically take those ideas in and share it with their friends, and then have something to talk about that is probably a tool they've never been able to have before. There you go. And I really am glad that you've let me be on the show, and
yeah.
I just want to encourage people that
I am a history buff. I love history, and I've tried to instill that with my kids, because my daughter's 16. She's fixing to be a junior in high school, and I've tried to tell her, because she hates history. She hates history class. I'm like, how do you hate history class? I said, you're not going to know about the future unless you learn from the past. I said, and I told her, I said, that's kind of an ignorant statement. You can't learn. You can't go into the future without learning from the past. And being a Christian, this kind of stuff is amazing. I like learning about stuff like this. My favorite channels are Discovery Channel, National Geographic Channel, because I enjoy learning about history, even if it's not biblical history, cultural history, learning about stuff. But Patterns of Evidence really brought forth something that I could actually became tangible to me, where I understood it and understood why you were doing what you were doing.
Well, thank you. I think the issue for a lot of us is that I think the way we're created, is that story is huge to the human. And I think if people that are having a hard time with history, if they just listen to it as a story, mm-hmm. And this is a story. This is a story about a filmmaker who was raised in a family that believed in the Bible and went off to go search for it, not thinking that there was going to be a problem. I mean, in this, sorry, I've got the book and the DVD. The DVD and the Blu-ray, this is my visual documentary of this journey. It's my personal story going on this search. So if some people are like, I don't like history. Well, that's about dates and all that. History is really a story about that interaction, going and looking for things and trying to understand things. And I think if it's put in the right context, if it's told in the right way, history can be fascinating for people. And that's what we try to do. Because it's an investigation as to where do we come from? Why do you have the name that you have? Where did you, it's like, where do we come from, like we've said, and where are we going? And what's going on in the world, like in the Middle East? Because it's affecting the whole world. And this is asking a question of who are these people from Israel? Why does the rest of the world, many people, are against them? And who are we, people of faith? And what does the rest of the world need to know about all this?
Right.
That's what this is all about. It's a big idea.
Both the film and the book, August 4th, called Patterns of Evidence, Exodus, by Tim Mahoney, and I really enjoyed the book and the film, and my prayer is that the Lord can use it to educate those who come across it, and it's to get more information about you and about the projects you're working on, including Patterns of Evidence, you can go to patternsofevidence.com, simple enough.
Right.
And just on behalf of Tim, we want to thank you for watching. My name is Jay Heilman. I just want to remind you to put Christ first in your life, and everything else will fall into place. God bless you.